Welcome to beautiful Franschhoek in the Western Cape. We are here at none other than Drakenstein Stud. We are going to touch base with racing manager Kevin Sommerville, an insight into his history, his growth through the industry around the world, including his brilliant time spent at Juddmonte International, one of the world's greatest breeders. How he followed this path down to Drakenstein to be racing manager where he is today. We're going to delve into the farm's policies, which makes them the outstanding breeder of the South African horse racing industry. And we are going to talk about the hot topic as well, Charles Dickens. It's a great day to be at work today, and we're filming Taking the Reins at the immaculate Drakenstein Stud. With me is racing manager Kevin Sommerville. Kevin, thank you very much for having us in your beautiful office today.
I wish, Justin. Thanks very much for being here. It's nice to have you guys here on the farm.
It's been long overdue because your stud farm has had a fantastic run over the last few years, and what we're going to do today is just delve into the history of Drakenstein a little bit. And before we get that, we'll touch on Kevin Sommerville, who he is, and how the bug of horse racing bit. So just for our viewers who don't know who you are, where did you go to school? I know it probably seems like a long time ago, just like it does to me. Where did you go to school, and where was the first bite into horse racing?
So Justin, I went to Pretoria Boys in Pretoria, obviously. And the first bug really bit is I don't know if you want the long story or the short story, but the long story, well, the short story is that I failed the subject at university.
Okay.
Had 6 months off, went across the island to go visit a friend of mine, was working in a pub in a simple way in the afternoon, started watching racing. So I was about 22 at this point, 21, and just loved it. So obviously I'd studied zoology and genetics at university, so and enjoyed sports. So it was a nice fit between the three of them, and that's when the bug bit, and came home, finished my degree, and then decided I'd get into this. I went to go work at a farm in Ireland called Ballylynch Stud, and the farm manager there took just a liking to me, and he really sort of made my career sort of take shape, and he got me onto the Irish National Stud course, which I did. And then, I tried to really sort of improve myself from then onwards. Yeah. So I wasn't born into a racing family or involved with racing early on. My auntie was a breeder down in Natal. She owned Connington Stud for a while. But from then on, it's really just been my own path.
Fantastic. That's exceptional. And then, obviously, I mean, I want to put words in your mouth, but you had put down the Dali Flying Start, which you attended as a real catalyst into the global scene of horse racing, and probably played a big role in where your career went forward. For the viewers who don't know exactly what the Dali Flying Start is, it's a 2-year program run by the Dali, now Godolphin, gang, and they send people all over the world. Just take us through the itinerary when you did it, and where you traveled to, and what you learned, and maybe some fellow alumni.
Sure. So I think it's a spectacular course, a wonderful idea by Sheikh Mohammed to develop young people into the industry. So it's a 2-year course, as you say. We got to spend some time in Ireland where we did the breaking in season. Then we went to America for the breeding season. We went to Australia for another breeding season. Then we went to Dubai for the racing season. And along the way, you're doing little sections with people. So I spent some time with Mike de Kock. When I was in America, I spent time at Keeneland. We went down and did 3,000 yearling views. We went and did all the September yearling selections with Jeffrey Russo and his team. And so then we went back to Ireland and then back to England to just finish off the course. So a spectacular course where in the mornings you're working with the horses and you're learning the groundwork of how to handle them, working hard. And in the afternoons, you're getting lectures from experts. So we had all sorts of people come in and teach us about pasture management, from to handicapping to just varied foaling to horse anatomy to farrier. I mean, we went on a farrier course. think I've completely forgotten what all of that is about, but it teaches you the basics on the racing industry. I don't think that really existed before that. So there was breeding courses and potentially a training course or whatever it was, but this combined all of them. And obviously you did it with 12 other students from around the world, so you made lifelong friends. And we were the second course that ever existed. The first course was 12 guys and girls, and the first course has actually had a wonderful sort of results around the world. Henry Field was on the first course, Ed Sackville, Tina Rao, so really Francis, who's now one of the best trainers in the world, Grafada, and Henry's now one of the biggest stud owners in Australia. He's really sort of doing an outstanding job. So it opened a lot of doors. You enter into the course wanting to do something, then something else opens up. So it was a spectacular. You got introduced to people that are at the tip of their game, and it would take you 15 years to have met that person or to be introduced to that person, and now you're just meeting them, and from that point you know them.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful, almost like you could say it's almost like an MBA in horse racing, but let's maybe not go that far.
And literally a flying start, because you're just building a network second to none and traveling the world, which in its own way gives you those experiences that people don't really know, see, or get to learn about in your own little nucleus of an industry we work, like especially now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the idea that you get to experience the American industry, which is very, very different to the Australian industry. And so as you trying to develop your career, you are then able to pull on this little bit of knowledge that you've learned along the way. You hark back to somebody saying something that, potentially that you then, use in another instance here or whatever it is along the way. So it was an incredible course. I made incredible friends along the way, and it was, I was incredibly lucky to get on it.
And post-flying start, take us into how you got to Juddmonte, because Juddmonte is probably, in my opinion, the greatest or most successful breeding operation in the world, pound for pound, I suppose is a good phrase of putting it. What was your time like there? What did you do? Who are the big horses you worked with? How was that? That must have been a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, it was. I think, you need a lot of luck along the way in your life. And I think that often, things present themselves and you have to sort of grab them. But in this instance, it was just purely timing. And my wife, Katrina, wanted to go overseas. I needed to look for a job. And I asked Jeffrey Russell, who'd worked for Keeneland, if there are any opportunities that he knew of in the UK. And he said to me that he would ask a friend of his, Tim Preston, who was a very good friend of Philip Mitchell, who was the general manager of Juddmonte at the time, if there were opportunities. And actually, literally the day before that, the nominations manager had gone to Philip and said, I think I want to move into a different direction. So it was the day before, my email went across to Philip. Then Jamie, who was the nominations guy at the time, his email, he came and sat with Philip, and Philip said, okay, actually, we've got somebody to replace you.
Wow.
So you can move over there and we'll get this guy to come over. So if I hadn't done the Godolphin Flying Start or the Darley Flying Start, I'd never have met Jeffrey. Jeffrey introduced me to Tim. Tim was a great friend of Philip's. And so that's how it happened. So it was purely, obviously I had to go across for an interview, somehow got the job, which was an incredible time. So at the time we were trying to develop Oasis Dream and Dancili's career. Oasis Dream was my favorite at the time. There was a few, really cool horses in training at the time, midday. So Oasis Dream's career was a fun one to sort of look after. We were covering 170 mares. You're having to phone Andreas or Vertimers or wherever it is, and you have to tell them, sorry, you can only have the 2 noms rather than the 4 that you're booking. So it was sort of battles of fire, and the things were changing in the UK breeding industry, how they worked with agents and stuff. So that was interesting. And but we, and at the time there was also a rather sort of average horse going around that everybody was talking about, Frankel, and he was in training, and so I was there for his 3-year-old career, but through my whole time at Juddmonte, I had a yearning to come back to South Africa. I felt like I needed to come back and almost be be home and try to help in an industry here, bring back some of the stuff that I'd learned. And so I worked for Juddmonte for about 4 years, and then decided it's time to come back to South Africa.
Well, perfect. You led us into the perfect intro, because my next mark was going to be Juddmonte into Drakenstein. How did that whole thing come about? Did you book a flight back home first, or did you receive a call saying there was maybe an opening? What were the initial chats and conversations?
So actually, sort of, I came back to help with the development of Cape Thoroughbred sales, and that was that was a change. There was obviously things happening in South African racing, and I wanted to assist Rob and Bruss in trying to develop that, because I felt that was something that was needed. And came back and I worked for them for about 6 months, and it was during that time Gaynor was a director of Cape Thoroughbred sales, and we just sort of started chatting a little bit, and I realized that Cape Thoroughbred sales wasn't really the right place for me. So I left, and it was about 2 months later that she made contact with me and said, come down, let's have a chat and see if there's something that you... So I met her while I was up in Juddmonte as well. She came and visited the Stallions, and we sat on the couch over there and had a really long afternoon chatting about breeding and racing, and where she wanted Drakenstein to go, and how what she felt, and where I felt like I could help, and that was it. And then I started about another 3 months after that. Also, timing was good.
Yeah, and I think if you sit back and you look at the last 10, 12, maybe 15 years, time goes by so quickly, there's been a visible policy adaptation to Drakenstein that started a good while ago, and you slowly started to see all little pieces come together, which has built it into this farm, which is just outbreeding its numbers, breeding Group 1 winners at the top level. When you sat with Gaynor, obviously I'm not talking about just that initial conversation, but you obviously would have sat down and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go and we're going to buy the best mares we can buy. I'm referring to maybe that period where you snapped up Beach Beauty and My Sanctuary and bought a whole bunch of those mares. Yeah. And obviously you'll elaborate further onto what they've gone and produced. But was that like from the onset? Obviously there was wisdom to that thought process, and it all didn't happen by luck. Was that the policy? Go out, buy those mares, upgrade the broodmare band, get as many good stallions as you can, and then go on to become the farm that it is today?
Yeah, so I think me and Gaynor, we had a lot of conversations about where she wanted to go, how we were going to get there. One of the things was specifically around the size of the farm. So she had built a farm that had a capacity for about 100 odd mares. And one of the things was, let's try to, and obviously she had gone overseas, bought some mares, brought them back down to South Africa, and those ones were taking their time to adapt to breeding South African type of horses, because I think that old saying, horses for courses, is really, really true for where you are trying to breed your horse. So we had lots of conversations, and it wasn't just something that happened overnight, but obviously I enjoyed the Juddmonte model, which was to race and breed everything. I mean, he had 250 brood mares, and he would race everything. So it was a wonderful model, and you build families, and you build a history to look back on. So, there's some incredible pedigrees. So if you go back and you look at Showcasing's pedigree, who's a wonderful stallion in the UK at the moment. And I won't go into too much detail, but, the father was bred by Juddmonte, the mother was bred by Juddmonte, the broodmare sow was bred by Juddmonte, the second dam was bred. All of this creates a nice legacy type of thing. So we had many conversations about that as well, and it felt like that would be something that Gaynor would be really interested in doing. And so we had, at the time, there were about 40 or 50 mares on the farm, but we had space for 100. So it was then how we're going to go and increase. So it was very much a model to try and focus on South African breds, focus on good race fillies in South Africa, and try to buy the best we can. Don't go crazy, but to choose the right ones, the ones that had the nice pedigrees or outstanding race fillies or whatever it was, or ones that actually were available to buy, because a lot of them are in hands
already
of people
owned by breeders, or
exactly, or people that are not willing to sell. So It was a lot of fun, and we obviously had the European stock here as well. So just mixing these and trying. We obviously, Trippy was a premier stallion at the time, and he still is. And we were trying to find bloodstock that's definitely going to suit what he required. So we went out and we identified some of these horses. Just going out and buying those mares that were really, really good race fillies. But in South Africa in particular, you can buy incredibly well. Like, you just look at the bloodstock results around the world now, what's happened at Tattersalls, what happened at Facey Tipton, what people are prepared to pay for top class race fillies. For some reason that doesn't translate in South Africa. And as well as I do that, you can buy these and less concentration on the deep pedigrees, but more the fact that filly had an ability to run.
It's quite an odd, like you say, in the international market, you almost get the Group 1 winners sell in that bracket, Group 2 winners in that bracket, Group 3 winners in that bracket, and there's almost no relevance to family or female line, whereas here, a breeder would, and it's not a criticism, but it's the way guys look at commercial, I suppose commercial responsibility with horses is you could have a Group 2 winner with no pedigree and the unplaced mare from a good family will have more value, which is what you're getting at.
Exactly. So I mean, we've done enough analysis around the world to know that your best breeding mares are usually your fillies that can run.
Yeah.
That statistically, it might very well be a self-fulfilling thing, but the bottom line is that statistically they outperform the others. So there's always the dams of Captain Ransoms and stuff that disprove your theory, but in the mass and statistically that's the way. So applying that sort of, and it's not only Drakenstein's model, it was a model that many farms around the world, Juddmonte only ever retired their listed or graded fillies. Maybe they would keep one filly that was related to something. So, but in South Africa you can find incredible value. So we were able to buy some really outstanding performers, or Gaynor was certainly able to buy some really outstanding performers for I would have thought incredible value considering what they would usually go around for the world. So we embarked on that, and it was a really fun process, and it consolidated, and we've had quite a lot of recent success buying those young mares that were well performed. But there's a lot more to it than just that. It's not just that sort of model, but you are able to do that in South Africa, which is not done by a lot of other breeders in South Africa.
I suppose a pretty good example would be Safe Passage, because I mean, his mother, was by Antonius Pius. She was a stakes winner.
Sure. Not
the most elaborate female line, and that probably would have skipped the eyes of people looking for big elaborate families. And I mean, as I said, by Antonius Pius, rather unfashionable dam sire, and produced Safe Passage as a Daily News winner. I mean, good example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think she's the only graded winner ever by Antonius Pius. And I think she's the only mare that has ever produced a graded winner out of an Antonius Pius mare. So she really is quite a unique product. But I mean, he was a incredibly quirky horse, but wonderful racehorse. And he ran in the Breeders' Cup Mile, Antonius Pius. He had a lovely pedigree, and she was really, really fast. And so, it was that Danzig line that had sort of worked fairly well with Silvano, which obviously produced Vercingetorix. So it seemed to be, and I think that often, when we discuss matings and we go through what's going to, we often just following what has already worked, not trying to sort of reinvent the wheel. And obviously, we sit and discuss it. Jan always makes the final decision, and I think that that's something that people don't really know about Drakenstein is, well, maybe they do, but the boss has the final say on everything. I don't think people realize how involved she is in everything that goes on here, from the finest detail to the matings to the trainers, the whole lot. It's again was incredibly involved, incredibly enthusiastic about Drakenstein. So it's a hell of a lot of fun working with an owner like that that has the passion for the industry. So that helps you to do your job, and you just have to do it properly. But it's a lot of fun.
Kevin, that's wonderful. One thing that people on the outside don't really know is, obviously we touched on earlier about owner-breeder operation. Okay, you do take a lot of yearlings to the sales, etc. But in the instance where you've got a horse that you've bred, you've identified it, you're going to race it, Charles Dickens, for example, what is the what would the process, the chronological order of a horse bred at Drakenstein to going to the training yard? Talk to us about Graafrenet, the pre-training. What is the process?
So I'll just go back one step. So we discussed, Gaynor was very keen to continue to be involved in the sales. Okay, so we weren't going to go the full Juddmonte model, which was to race everything. We were going to sort of split it up. We're going to keep the factory going, which was to race the fillies, and we would try to fund the operation by selling the colts. So that is the model that we sort of discussed about 10 years ago, and I think that's coming. It's really sort of building now because we're starting to build the families, and so in that process, you talk about Charles Dickens. He was a horse that was catalogued for sale, and the colts. Obviously, we discuss them, talk about what sale they're going to suit, and then they go on the sale. Like Charles Dickens was meant to go on a sale. Unfortunately, he failed for veterinary reasons and wasn't able to go. So he became one of those horses that we almost raced by default. With any of the colts that we race, it's really by default. Sometimes there's a really strong emotional attachment to a particular horse. Let's say Lancaster Bomber dies and maybe there's an outstanding colt we want to race. But in the main, the colts go to the sales. But yeah, so the foals are, so all the mares are here on Drakenstein, and the foals are born here at Drakenstein. And they're raised here till weaning stage, and then at 6 months of age, 6 to 7 months of age, they go across to the Graafrenet property, which I think was originally where Gaynor wanted to set up her operation to breed horses from, because the Karoo has a lot of aspects which are really sort of good for raising horses. For one, you have really cold winters, you have really hot summers. Horses seem to thrive. It's dry. The water's exceptional. Gary Player will tell you that. There's great calcium there. It builds great bone. So it's a place that makes them certainly tough. I'm not sure it makes them faster, but it certainly makes them
more
tougher.
durable.
Yeah, definitely. They have to fight for their food with some of the impala or the kudu or the yeland that are grazing with them. So, and we've had Steinbeck. If you go look at him, he's a horse that is owned by Nick and Nancy now. He's a horse he's got markings right here. Oh, wow. So he got jabbed by an yeland bull that was rather wanted to get to the Lucerne. So it is tough out there. And then the colts will come back here. If they're going for the January sale, they'll come back in November. If they're going to the April sale, they'll come back in February. So we bring them back in batches and then prep them here, and then those go to the sales. The fillies are left there to just be horses for a lot longer. And Dave Hampton and his team will look after them there. It is rough and tough. You do have a lot of injuries that occur out there, but that is, that's yearlings. They do silly things. So those horses then come back here. And, so we then bring them to the pre-training yard and we look after them there. They're broken in. Jackson looks after that team. Taryn is very much involved as well. And then we bring in Malanda Toy as well to really just do the final touches and really just, eke out all the little idiosyncrasies that might be occurring within a yearling. And then slowly but surely we select horses to go in early, one's a little bit later, depending on how they're coping with their pre-training. So it is, it's quite a process. It's very much a sort of like a European Juddmonte view, but it's a Drakenstein view as well, because it's very much the way things were here and have always been done. So pre-training occurs across there. There's a track. There's a trotting track for horses to be broken in. So horse walker, and so there's a treadmill across there. So we try to expose the young horses to as much. There's the pens. We put them through the pens just so that they've exposed to everything over a long period of time. Mentally they sound and they go into the trainers, and then it's up to them to really so there's a huge amount that is put into every single horse to try and get them to achieve the best results that they possibly can, and then it's ultimately down to them. And then the incredibly beautiful one ends up being as slow as anything, and the little pit pony, how
That's
it works.
How it goes, absolutely. And how would you, so you don't have to give too much away, but now they've completed their pre-training program, and of course, as we've seen in the racetracks in the last few years, you guys are racing a lot of horses, top level horses, with a lot of trainers. So how do you say, this one's going to Mark, this one's going to Sean, this one's going to Candace, Justin? What is that, the Aussies have been super successful for you in the last few years. Do you pick your horses and think, this is a Joburg horse maybe, and then take it from there? Or do you, who trained the mare, send the progeny of the mare to that trainer again? How do you normally deal with
I think that definitely is always a good starting point. I think we also we obviously sit down and discuss it. We do try to identify, what is potentially a Joburg horse, what's a Cape Town horse. I think that, what's worked. Often family hasn't worked with anything yet, so then it might go to somebody new, or but often we might split them up. So let's say, for instance, if somebody's had success with that family, we'll intentionally send it somewhere else, just because that might mean that if we're selling a yearling out of that family, we were hoping to two trainers to have interested, or maybe two trainers plus somebody else that might be interested. So everything is sort of designed to help our commercial aspect, which is our selling of our colts. So I don't think that there's a massive amount of science that goes into it. It's very much a feeling, and it's very much what gainer wants. So we discuss it, and we send where things are happening. But dividing them up, we made a decision to sort of just send quite a few more horses to Johannesburg about 6-7 years ago, and with initial results which were very poor. So we obviously learned from that to see what might work there better. And I think we also got a bit lucky, because horses like Safe Passage, he was at a sale, he could have been sold. We had a reserve on him, which I don't think is particularly high reserve for a Silvano out of a Group 2 winner. I think it was 500 or 600. Didn't get a bid. Well, he got a bid, but he didn't meet our reserve. So with his horse now, it was COVID. It wasn't an opportunity to be at the sales where you could now sell this horse after the sale. So Mike had done particularly well with Silvano Colts, so he'd send it to Mike. So I think that the majority of horses will suit the majority of trainers. I think the guys know how to train horses. So
we do have pretty good trainers here, I
exactly,
suppose, for the most part. Kevin, it would be remiss of us not to talk about some of your stallions, because this farm has got tremendous stallions. Obviously, we were talking a little bit beforehand with Trippy. He's been a godsend, hasn't he? He obviously wasn't a cheap horse. He had a track record of being a pretty decent stallion in the States. He's champion sire in Florida.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So, he's just been a phenom. And, I suppose there was, being a stud farm, looking for sons of Trippy to come to stud, and there wasn't looking like too many big colts of his that could be potential suitors for a good while. And now right at the end of his career, he threw Gold Standard and Jet Dark and Charles Dickens, so might have a flurry of Trippy colts at stud pretty soon, which is going to be interesting. But you've also got, What a Winter, desperately unlucky with Lancaster Bomber passing. Futura has got what looks like a good horse in Rockpool that won yesterday.
Sure.
So what are you seeing with your stallions going forward? Where obviously Futura is still on the early side. He's only had a handful of crops.
Yeah.
What a Winter, we know what we get with him. We get
Sure.
speed, precocity, etc., etc.
Exactly.
How are you going with the stallions?
Yeah, look, Trippy, we can touch on him for a long time. He has just been such a legend for Drakenstein. What an incredible find for Gaynor to go out and buy, the very first stallion that she stands as Drakenstein that ends up being champion sire. So that was an incredibly proud moment for him to become champion sire. I think during a particularly strong crop of stallions, there was Silvano, Dynasty, Captain L, who else was VAR was around at the time. I'm sure there's another one I've left off, but it was a particularly strong crop of stallions. It looked like it anyway, and he was champion sire right in the middle of it, which was fantastic effort for a horse that also struggled potentially with his fertility, but his numbers. He could never really get huge books. So I think a wonderful achievement, and he's translated from dirt to grass particularly well. So I think that I think they show an incredible amount of speed. Trippies, they're naturally very, very athletic horses. I think maybe in the early years, trainers might have just got carried away a little bit. They show just such natural ability, but I think they've learned to harness that a little bit better now. And they like to be left alone. Not all of them, but they like to be left alone a little bit and do their own thing. And I think trainers have figured that out now. And so, we're sort of seeing the end. And I think we at Draken certainly aim to try and find mares that suited him, as mares that maybe add a little bit more stamina, so that the horses genuinely get a mile or get the 10 furlongs. I think we've luckily had a little bit of success with with some of these horses that we've bred over the years. So, but he's just been an incredible foundation stallion for Drakenstein, and I think, and certainly Gaynor will, and look back at the influence of Trippy, and it's just been phenomenal. So, but you have to develop the band, and you have to try and find stallions that are going to complement the mares that you've got here, and. I think you make mistakes along the way, buying certain stallions that don't necessarily suit or they don't work out. That's the stallion game, because they're not all going to be Trippies, that is for sure. So, Winter's been a lovely stallion. He says he's very well syndicated. John Freeman and them look after him, so he's had huge support. I think he does a fantastic job. You buy a Winter, you're guaranteed of almost getting a winner. So that's a wonderful stallion. And look, I think. With Futura, I think he's young. He's still got we think he's got, the sky's the limit for him, but he really hasn't been particularly well looked after, I guess, on our part as well. But we sort of retired Legislative Futura at the same time, which might have, in hindsight, been a mistake. They competed for the same type of mare, and that maybe has just put Futura slightly on the back foot. But I think, we've got decent mares coming to him over the last 2-3 years. So I really think that things are going to take off.
Well, when last time I was here, you showed me some of the mares he had covered. I mean, that's a Champion Sire book of mares. He covered those top race fillies.
So you've got to, and we've really ploughed into him. And the results that we're seeing on the ground this year is the first real year where we sent the best of the best that we had. And I'm extremely happy with the foals this year. So I'm not just saying that. I think that they really are an outstanding bunch. So he's a very interesting horse because I think he's very much his father. Mm-hmm. He sires like his father. I mean, he works particularly well with Jalad mares. He works particularly well with Trippy mares, and we know that all of those things work particularly well with Dynasty. So he's very much like that. But he can do one other thing that maybe Dynasty couldn't, is that he can throw a pretty decent sprinter. Mm-hmm. So you'll see some of his graded winners over sprint distances. That is something that is odd about him. So there must be speed lurking, or he complements those sprinting type of mares. So he's definitely in a very, very interesting. I just wish we had got more mares in his first 4 seasons. I think you'd see a very different horse. Some of them take time. Some of them are more classic. I really hope that he's got a decent bunch of 3-year-olds this year, and they look the part. And I'm sure that they're going to be winning stake races, yeah.
Well, he's certainly got the bases loaded to come, that's for sure. And I think we have to, Kevin, this horse Charles Dickens obviously is the talk of the town at the moment. I mean, he looks like he could be the perfect culmination of a real breeding operations policy and put together all the way through, because this horse, I mean, he could be the pinnacle of being an owner breed operation. We might be getting ahead of ourselves, but I think that performance against those older horses, carrying the weight he carried, I mean, he's thrown out a huge number. He's run a mid-130s if you use Russian Rock and 55er, who, to be fair, are pretty decent horses to use, and they're pretty consistent running to their levels. And he did it in a canter. So obviously he's got a big match race coming up, if we can call it that, in the Group 1 with the quality of field, because Mark's coming with Union Square, Shoemaker, Anfield Rockets here. But it looks like Cousin Casey and Charles Dickens in any year would be a Monty for the Guineas. So how good do you think he is? Just you've seen a lot of good horses over your time. Early on, it looked like he might be a horse who might be a 1,400-meter horse, travels hard, but the way he ran the other day, he dropped the bit, he settled, he was finding to the line. I mean, he's really exciting.
Yeah, he is, Justin. We were trying very hard to just keep level-footed and not get ahead of ourselves. He does do things that other horses can't do, which already puts him into that really fun category of exceptional horses. So, but he hasn't won a Grade 1 yet. That's his big target is Saturday. Whatever happens, I'm sure that if things go his way, because you need a lot of luck in racing, you really do. There's so many things that people have no idea what it actually takes to get a horse to the races. These are animals; they're not machines. There's things going wrong with them all the time. So if he can get to the Guineas and nothing is wrong with him and he runs his race, I think he'll go very, very close. He's a different level, and he's been different right from the beginning. And actually, in fact, right from the beginning in his entire life, he was an exceptional foal. He was an exceptional weanling. He was an exceptional yearling. He never had anything go wrong with him. And So, you know, hopefully things can go his way. But, you know, we know in the Guineas, and I'm not trying to, you know, but history will tell you that the dynasties got beaten in the Guineas, but they ended up, you know, coming back and winning. Yeah. So things can go, there's the way racing is happening at the moment in the last couple of weeks, it's a little bit tricky.
Yes.
The horses going all to the outside. So, you know, it's all these sort of factors play a part, but I think I think the competition is not just Cousin Casey separated himself from the others. I think that there'll be some, you know, Mike's horses, there'll be others. Brett will certainly be revving his horses up. So I think it's going to be a great race Saturday and be fun. And it's fun. It's nice to have horses like this for people to get really excited, especially at a time for Cape racing when there's change, and it's, you know, you guys are doing a fantastic job, and, you know, long may it continue. So having a horse like this is a lot of fun for Gaynor, and you know, hopefully he can deliver for us. But whatever happens, you know, it happens.
Yeah, I mean, you 100%, you summed that up perfectly. I mean, it's a marketing dream, but at the end of the day, it's just one horse race, and there's going to be a lot more after it.
Sure.
And I mean, we can draw a little bit of comparison with Trip of Fortune, I suppose, because he had I would say, not as explosive, although pretty similar path. I mean, this time last year when he was going through that, you know, he looked like this horse is going to be unbeatable. And then obviously he had all the interference in the main race, and then he went off kilter a little bit, looked like he might not stay. Well, he came back in the WSB Greenpoint and blew all those serious horses away. And as we said earlier, it's one race, put it behind him. A year later, it comes full circle, and he's a massive runner on Mons King's Plate. So same thing, Charles Dickens. Look, I'm not making any excuses. We think he's going to win. But, I mean, he just looks like, as you say, does everything so naturally and easily. Let's hope that he's as good as you hope he is, and
so too.
Hopefully he can come back to this farm and cover mares like his father.
That would be wonderful. That would be the ultimate, I think, for any sort of owner breeder, is to be able to breed something that comes back, and you know, yeah. So that would be the ultimate aim.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been fantastic. Probably a little bit longer than you expected, but it's been fantastic to hear from you. I'm sure our listeners and our viewers have been enlightened with a lot of information, and we look forward to seeing you at the Hollywood Bet Guineas next weekend, and hopefully you can be on the winning end.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.